The reception hall smelled like bleach and broken dreams. I should have taken that as a sign, but I was too busy watching Zoya charm the venue manager with that smile she'd perfected in college, the one that made people forget she'd just insulted them 30 seconds earlier. "Trent, honey, could you please pay attention?" Zoya's voice carried that edge I'd been hearing more often lately. "Mrs. Hathaway is explaining the bar setup." I nodded and tried to look interested while Mrs. Hathaway droned on about champagne flutes and cocktail napkins. The truth was, I'd rather have been back at the construction site dealing with a busted water main than standing here pretending to care about centerpieces. At least pipes were honest. When they broke, they didn't smile at you first. "The open bar runs until midnight," Mrs. Hathaway continued, gesturing toward the mahogany bar that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. "We provide a bartender, of course, but the wedding party is welcome to sample the selections during the walkthrough." Zoya's eyes lit up like she'd just won the lottery. "Oh, that's perfect. I've been so stressed with all the planning." I watched her glide toward the bar, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Even after 3 years together, she still moved like she was performing for an invisible audience. Maybe she was. "Your fiancé seems lovely," Mrs. Hathaway said, though her tone suggested she was reading from a script. "Very spirited." That was one word for it. I'd met Zoya at a company barbecue where she'd been dating my supervisor. By the end of the night, she was giving me her number. I should have wondered then why she'd switched horses so quickly, but I was 28 and stupid enough to think I'd won some kind of prize. "She's something else," I agreed, watching Zoya pour herself a generous glass of wine. It wasn't even 3 in the afternoon. The wedding party started trickling in around then, her bridesmaids, my groomsmen, and assorted relatives who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. My best friend Mike showed up last, wearing that goofy grin that had gotten us both in trouble since high school. "Sorry I'm late," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Traffic was insane." "No problem. We're just getting started." Mike's eyes found Zoya at the bar, and something flickered across his face. Too quick for me to catch, but not quick enough to miss entirely. He'd been acting strange lately, canceling our usual Thursday night drinks and being vague about his plans. I'd chalked it up to wedding stress, but now I wasn't so sure. "Open bar, huh?" Mike said, already heading in Zoya's direction. "Don't mind if I do." I followed, partly because Mrs. Hathaway was still talking about napkin colors, and partly because something about Mike's eagerness bothered me. When I reached the bar, Zoya was already on her second glass and laughing at something Mike had whispered in her ear. "What's so funny?" I asked. "Oh, nothing," Zoya said, but her cheeks were flushed in a way that had nothing to do with the wine. "Mike was just telling me about his disaster of a date last weekend." Mike nodded a little too enthusiastically. "Yeah, total nightmare. The woman spent the entire dinner talking about her ex-husband's alimony payments." It was a decent cover story, except Mike had told me he'd stayed home last weekend to catch up on work. I filed that information away and grabbed a beer from the bartender. The next hour passed in a blur of forced smiles and small talk. Zoya's parents showed up, Mr. and Mrs. Volkov, who still treated me like I was tracking mud through their pristine colonial home. They'd made their feelings about their daughter marrying a construction supervisor crystal clear from day one, though they were too polite to say it outright. "The venue is quite nice," Mrs. Volkov said to me, managing to make it sound like a criticism. "Very rustic." "We wanted something with character," I replied, which was code for something we could actually afford. Mr. Volkov nodded absently, already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. I excused myself and wandered toward the kitchen, where Zoya's bridesmaids had gathered like a flock of designer vultures. "I still can't believe she's going through with it," one of them was saying. Jessica, I think, though they all looked the same to me with their identical highlights and yoga pants. "I know, right?" Another one chimed in, especially after what happened at the bachelorette party. My ears perked up. Zoya had been deliberately vague about her bachelorette weekend in Atlantic City, claiming it was just dinner and spa treatments. Somehow I doubted these women had driven 3 hours for cucumber facials. "Derek's hands were all over her," the first bridesmaid continued. "I thought she was going to drag him back to her room right there in the casino." Derek. I knew that name, Zoya's coworker from the marketing firm where she'd started 6 months ago. She'd mentioned him a few times, always in passing, always with the casual indifference of someone working very hard to seem casual and indifferent. "She was so wasted," Jessica said with a giggle. "Good thing we got her out of there before she did something really stupid." "Well, more stupid than usual," the other one added, and they both dissolved into laughter. I backed away from the kitchen before they could spot me, my mind racing. It wasn't proof of anything, just gossip from women who probably thrived on drama. but combined with Mike's weird behavior and Zoya's increasing distance lately, it painted a picture I didn't like. I found Zoya back at the bar, now working on her third glass of wine and deep in conversation with Mike. They were standing closer than necessary, their heads bent together like conspirators sharing secrets. "Having fun?" I asked, sliding up beside them. Zoya startled slightly, spilling wine on her white blouse. "God, you scared me. We were just talking about the seating arrangements." "Right," I said. "Seating arrangements." Mike cleared his throat. "I should probably head out soon. Early day tomorrow." "Stay for the cake tasting," Zoya said quickly. "Mrs. Hathaway is bringing out samples in a few minutes." "I really can't." "Please?" She put her hand on his arm, letting it linger just a beat too long. "It would mean a lot to me." Mike glanced at me, then back at Zoya. "Okay, sure, for a few more minutes." I watched this exchange with growing unease. There was something happening here, something just beneath the surface that I couldn't quite grasp. It was like trying to remember a dream. The harder I focused, the more it slipped away. Mrs. Hathaway appeared with a cart full of cake samples, and the wedding party gathered around like hungry wolves. I tried to focus on the difference between vanilla bean and French vanilla, but my attention kept drifting to Zoya and Mike. They were being careful now, maintaining proper distance, but I could feel the tension between them like a live wire. "The chocolate ganache is divine," Mrs. Hathaway was saying. "Very popular with our younger couples." Zoya sampled a piece and made an exaggerated sound of pleasure. "Oh my God, this is incredible. And Trent, you have to try this." She held out her fork, and I opened my mouth obediently. The cake was good, rich and decadent, but it tasted like sawdust to me. Everything felt wrong, like I was watching a play where all the actors had forgotten their lines but were improvising anyway. "We should probably make a decision today," I said. "The wedding is only 2 weeks away." "Right, of course." Zoya's smile was bright and brittle. "The chocolate ganache it is." Mrs. Hathaway made a note on her clipboard. "Excellent choice. Now shall we go over the timeline for the reception? Cocktail hour begins at 6, dinner service at 7:30. I tuned out again, my eyes following Zoya as she drifted back toward the bar. Mike followed a few seconds later, casual as anything, but I was starting to recognize the pattern. They were like magnets, drawn to each other despite their efforts to appear indifferent. The rationale part of my brain told me I was being paranoid. Wedding stress could make anyone act strange, and I'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to finish a project before the honeymoon. Maybe I was reading too much into innocent interactions. But the construction worker in me knew the difference between a small crack and a structural failure, and what I was seeing looked suspiciously like the latter. "I need some air," I announced to no one in particular. The venue had a side door that led to a small courtyard where the smokers usually gathered. I pushed through it and found myself alone with the late afternoon sun and my increasingly dark thoughts. The whole situation felt surreal, like I was planning my own funeral instead of my wedding. I was about to head back inside when I heard the door open behind me. Footsteps on the stone patio, hushed voices, the soft clink of jewelry. I stayed where I was, hidden behind a decorative column, and listened. "This is crazy," Mike's voice, lower than usual but still recognizable. "He's right inside." "So?" Zoya's voice was slurred from the wine but defiant. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're just talking. Come on, Zoya. You know this isn't just talking." "What do you want me to say, Mike? That I made a mistake? That I should have chosen you instead?" There was a long pause, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not my heart stopping or anything dramatic, just a steady, creeping certainty that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't control. "It's not too late," Mike said finally. "You could still what? Leave him at the altar? Humiliate him in front of everyone? Better than living a lie." Another pause. Then the sound of movement, fabric rustling, a soft intake of breath. I risked a glance around the column and saw them standing close enough to share the same air. Zoya's hand was on Mike's chest, his fingers tangled in her hair. "We can't," she whispered, but she wasn't pulling away. "Just once," Mike said, "before you marry him. Just so we both know." I'd heard enough. More than enough. I backed away from the column as quietly as possible and slipped through a side entrance that led to the venue's main lobby. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with a strange kind of clarity. Like I'd been wearing glasses with the wrong prescription for months and had finally found the right pair. The lobby was empty except for Mrs. Hathaway behind the reception desk, updating her files. She looked up when I approached, her professional smile already in place. "Mr. Ardell, how can I help you?" "I need to cancel the wedding," I said. Her smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "The wedding, all of it. The venue, the catering, the flowers, everything." Mrs. Hathaway blinked rapidly, like she was trying to process information that didn't compute. Sir, the event is in 2 weeks. According to your contract, any cancellation within 30 days results in forfeiture of all deposits and... I understand the terms, I said, pulling out my phone. I just need you to document the cancellation with a timestamp. I'd spent 3 years in construction management. I knew the importance of documentation, of creating a paper trail that couldn't be disputed later. Mrs. Hathaway reluctantly pulled up our file and began typing, her fingers moving across the keyboard like she was defusing a bomb. May I ask what happened? She said without looking up. If there's been some misunderstanding... No misunderstanding, I said, watching the timestamp appear on her screen. Just a change of plans. While she worked, I composed an email on my phone. Nothing dramatic or emotional. Just the facts, laid out clearly and concisely. I attached the security footage I'd saved from the corridor camera, along with screenshots of the cancellation notices and forfeiture documentation. The recipient list included everyone on our wedding guest list, plus the wedding party group chat and the RSVP thread. 47 people in total, all about to get a front row seat to the implosion of what they'd thought was a fairy tale romance. The cancellation is complete, Mrs. Hathaway said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Ardell, are you sure about this? Sometimes couples have cold feet and... I'm sure, I said, my finger hovering over the send button. Thank you for your help. I hit send and watched the email disappear into the digital ether. Somewhere in the building, Zoya was probably still deciding whether to cross the line with my best friend. In about 30 seconds, it wouldn't matter what she decided. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages, missed calls, notifications from the group chat. I turned off the sound and headed for the exit, leaving Mrs. Hathaway staring at her computer screen like it had just caught fire. The parking lot was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows between the cars. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching the venue's main entrance and waiting. It didn't take long. Zoya burst through the doors like she was being chased, Mike close behind her. Even from a distance, I could see the panic in her movements, the way she kept checking her phone and shaking her head. Other wedding party members started appearing. Bridesmaids, groomsmen, relatives who'd been enjoying the open bar and were now trying to process what they'd just read. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving them all behind. I had work to do. The drive home took 20 minutes, but it felt like 20 hours. My phone kept buzzing in the passenger seat, a constant stream of calls and messages that I ignored. I knew what they'd be saying. Confusion, concern, demands for explanation. Zoya would be in full damage control mode by now, spinning some story about misunderstandings and security camera malfunctions. It wouldn't work. The footage was clear enough, and the timestamp matched perfectly with the moment they'd disappeared from the reception. More importantly, I'd learned something about people over the years. When presented with drama, they usually chose the most entertaining explanation, not the most charitable one. My house sat at the end of the end street in a neighborhood that had seen better days. I'd bought it as a fixer-upper 3 years ago, planning to renovate it room by room. The kitchen was finished, and I'd made good progress on the living room, but the rest was still a work in progress. Zoya had never liked it, always pushing for us to rent something nicer in her parents' neighborhood. Now I was glad we hadn't. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the peeling paint on the front porch. Funny how a house could feel different when you knew you'd be living in it alone. Not worse, exactly. Just different. My phone rang as I was unlocking the front door. Zoya's ringtone, some pop song she'd programmed in months ago. I let it go to voicemail and headed inside. The living room still smelled like the wood stain I'd applied to the baseboards last weekend. Wedding gifts were stacked on the dining room table, boxes wrapped in silver paper that we'd never open now. I'd have to return them all, I realized. Another item for the growing list of post-explosion cleanup tasks. I opened a beer and sat down at my laptop, pulling up the wedding planning folder I'd organized with typical construction supervisor efficiency. Vendor contracts, payment schedules, contact information, everything I needed to methodically dismantle the event that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The caterer was first. I called their main number and got transferred to our coordinator, a cheerful woman named Linda who'd been planning our menu for months. Trent, how are you? Please tell me you're not calling to add more dietary restrictions. I've already got the vegetarian and gluten-free options sorted. Actually, Linda, I need to cancel the catering contract. Silence. Then, hey, cancel. The wedding is in 2 weeks. We've already ordered the ingredients, scheduled the staff. I understand there will be penalties. I just need the cancellation documented. Trent, what's going on? Is Zoya okay? I almost laughed. Zoya's fine. She's just not getting married anymore. Another pause. Oh, oh my. Well, let me pull up your file. While Linda processed the cancellation, my phone buzzed with a text message. Zoya, call me now. This is all a misunderstanding. I deleted it and moved on to the florist. Same conversation, same shocked reaction, same documentation of cancellation and forfeiture. The hotel block was next. 40 rooms reserved for out-of-town guests who wouldn't be needing them anymore. Mr. Ardell, the hotel manager said when I explained the situation, I have to tell you, this is highly unusual. Most couples work through their differences rather than... We're not most couples, I said. Can you confirm the cancellation in writing? By the time I finished with the vendors, my email inbox was overflowing. The wedding party group chat had exploded into chaos, dozens of messages ranging from confused questions to outright accusations. Zoya's bridesmaids were defending her, claiming the security footage was somehow doctored or taken out of context. My groomsmen were mostly silent, probably trying to figure out which side to take. But it was the messages from the extended guest list that interested me most. Cousins, coworkers, family friends, people who had no skin in the game and could afford to be honest about what they'd seen. The consensus was pretty clear. The footage showed exactly what it looked like, and everyone was shocked but not entirely surprised. Always thought something was off about those two, wrote my cousin Danny, who'd met Zoya exactly twice. Mike seemed way too interested in the bride for a best man, added my coworker Janet. Girls got wandering eyes, contributed Zoya's own aunt, which made me smile despite everything. My phone rang again, Mike this time. I almost answered, curious to hear what kind of explanation he'd cobbled together. But I had a better idea. I let it go to voicemail and waited. Sure enough, 2 minutes later my phone chimed with a new message. Mike's voice, shaky and defensive. Trent, man, you've got this all wrong. Nothing happened between me and Zoya. We were just talking, I swear. That footage doesn't show what you think it shows. Call me back, okay? We can work this out. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to the group chat with a simple caption. Mike's explanation. Then I opened a new text thread and typed, Zoya says it's a misunderstanding. Mike says nothing happened. Interesting how their stories don't match. The group chat went silent for about 30 seconds. Then the floodgates opened. Wait, what did Zoya say exactly? Mike's story keeps changing. If nothing happened, why are they both so defensive? That voicemail sounds guilty as hell. I watched the conversation spiral with detached fascination. I wasn't adding fuel to the fire, just providing information and letting human nature take its course. People loved a good scandal, especially when it involved someone they'd always found a little too perfect. Zoya's next call came 20 minutes later. This time I answered. Trent, thank God. Listen to me very carefully. I'm listening. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Mike and I were discussing wedding details, and the camera angle made it look like something else. You know how security footage can be misleading. Uh-huh. I need you to send a message to everyone explaining that you jumped to conclusions. Tell them the wedding is back on and that you're sorry for the confusion. I took a sip of my beer and considered this. What were you and Mike discussing exactly? About the wedding, I mean. Just logistics, seating arrangements, and timing for the ceremony. Seating arrangements that required you to put your hand on his chest? Silence. Then, it wasn't like that. What was it like, Zoya? I was emotional about the wedding stress, and Mike was comforting me, as a friend, that's all. And the conversation I overheard in the courtyard, about living a lie and it not being too late? Another pause, longer this time. You were eavesdropping? I was getting some air. You two weren't exactly whispering. Trent, please. I love you. I want to marry you. Mike is confused about his feelings, but nothing happened between us. Nothing. I almost believed her. She was good at this. Had always been good at making her version of events sound reasonable, even when the evidence pointed in the opposite direction. But I'd spent too many years dealing with subcontractors who promised the work would be done on time, with material suppliers who swore the delay wasn't their fault, with inspectors who insisted the code violations were minor. I'd learned to trust documentation over explanations. I'll think about it, I said. Really? The relief in her voice was palpable. Oh, thank you. I knew you'd understand once I explained. I said I'd think about it. I didn't say I believed you. I hung up and immediately forwarded the call recording to the group chat. Modern phones made everything so convenient. The response was immediate and brutal. Zoya's own friends started picking apart her story, pointing out inconsistencies and asking uncomfortable questions. The tide of public opinion was turning, and she was drowning in it. My doorbell rang an hour later. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. and Mrs. Volkov standing on my front porch, their faces grim. Zoya's parents had arrived for the reckoning. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Mr. Volkov, Mrs. Volkov. Trent, Mr. Volkov said stiffly, we need to discuss this situation with our daughter. What situation is that? Mrs. Volkov stepped forward, her voice sharp with maternal protectiveness. These ridiculous accusations you've been spreading. Zoya explained everything. It's all a misunderstanding based on misleading camera footage. Did she show you the footage? Well, no, but would you like to see it? I pulled out my phone and queued up the security video. The Volkovs huddled around the small screen, their expressions growing darker as they watched their daughter's hand slide up Mike's chest, watched her lean into him like she was drowning and he was the only life preserver in sight. This is from the venue's security system, I said when the clip ended. Timestamp shows it was taken about an hour ago, right around the time Zoya claimed she was discussing seating arrangements with Mike. Mr. Volkov cleared his throat. The angle could be misleading. There's audio too, I lied smoothly. Would you like me to play that part? Mrs. Volkov's face had gone pale. Audio? Just once, before you marry him, I quoted from memory. Just so we both know. That's what Mike said to your daughter. Her response was, we can't, not that's inappropriate or I'm getting married. Just we can't. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see them processing the information, weighing their daughter's explanation against the evidence of their own eyes and ears. Where is Zoya now? Mrs. Volkov asked finally. I assumed she was with you. She's at our house, Mr. Volkov said. Packing. Packing? We told her to leave, Mrs. Volkov said, her voice barely above a whisper. After we saw the messages in that group chat, after we heard what people were saying, we couldn't have her in our home, not with our reputation in the community. I stared at them, genuinely surprised. I'd expected them to close ranks around their daughter, to dismiss the evidence and blame me for jumping to conclusions. The fact that they'd thrown her out suggested the situation was even worse than I'd realized. She has nowhere to go, Mrs. Volkov continued. Her apartment lease ended last month when she moved in with you. Her friends, well, you've seen how they're reacting. That's not my problem anymore. Mr. Volkov nodded slowly. No, I suppose it isn't. We came here to ask you to reconsider, to give her another chance. But after seeing that footage, she made her choice, I said. Now she gets to live with the consequences. They left without another word, walking back to their car like mourners leaving a funeral. I watched them drive away and felt something that might have been satisfaction, if satisfaction weren't such a cold emotion. My phone buzzed with another text from Zoya. My parents kicked me out. I have nowhere to go. Please, Trent, I'm sorry. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. In the group chat, someone had posted a screenshot of Zoya's Instagram story, a photo of her sitting in her car in a parking lot, looking lost and desperate. The caption read, "When your whole life falls apart in one afternoon." Attention-seeking behavior, wrote one of her former bridesmaids. Classic Zoya. Maybe she should have thought about consequences before she started playing games, added another. I closed the group chat and opened a beer, settling back into my recliner. The house felt different now, not empty, but clean, like I'd finally gotten rid of something that had been making me sick without realizing it. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding. Tonight, I was content to watch the wreckage burn. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The story had taken on a life of its own overnight, spreading through social media like a wildfire. Someone had posted the security footage to TikTok with the caption, "When you catch your fiancée cheating at your own wedding venue," and it had already racked up 200,000 views. The comments section was brutal. People love a good cheating story, especially when there's clear video evidence and a satisfying revenge plot. Zoya had become the villain in a viral drama, and the internet was not feeling sympathetic. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes," read the top comment. "Imagine being this dumb and getting caught on camera," said another. "The audacity of doing this at the wedding venue, though," contributed a third. I scrolled through the messages on my phone while drinking coffee in my kitchen. Most were from people I barely knew, offering support or asking for more details. A few were from Zoya's friends, begging me to make this stop and think about what this is doing to her mental health. One message stood out from the rest. It was from Derek, Zoya's coworker, the same Derek who'd apparently had his hands all over her during the bachelorette party. "Trent, this is Derek from Zoya's office. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand about the situation. Can we meet somewhere private?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Derek reaching out suggested there were more layers to this story, more secrets waiting to be uncovered. The smart thing would be to ignore him, to let sleeping dogs lie and focus on moving forward. But I'd never been accused of being smart when I was angry. I texted back, Mulligan's bar on 5th Street, 1 hour. Mulligan's was the kind of place where construction workers went to complain about their supervisors and drink away their overtime pay. Dark, loud, and filled with people who minded their own business. Perfect for a conversation that might get ugly. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and nursing a beer he'd barely touched. He looked exactly like I'd expected. Expensive haircut, designer clothes, the kind of soft hands that had never held anything heavier than a laptop. "Thanks for coming," he said as I slid into the opposite seat. "Talk." He glanced around nervously, like he was worried about being overheard. "Look, I know how this looks, but the situation between Zoya and me is complicated." "Complicated how?" "We've been involved for about 4 months now, since shortly after she started at the company." I felt something settle in my stomach. Not surprise, exactly, but confirmation of what I'd already suspected. Involved. It started as just a work friendship, but it developed into something more. She said she was having problems with you, that the relationship had been over for months, but she didn't know how to end it. "So she decided to string me along until the wedding?" Derek shifted uncomfortably. "She was scared of your reaction. She said you had a temper, that you might become violent if she tried to leave." I laughed, short and bitter. "Violent? I've never raised a hand to anyone in my life." "That's not what she told me." "And you believed her? Why would she lie?" I studied his face, the genuine confusion, the defensive posture of someone who'd been played but hadn't figured it out yet. "Derek, let me ask you something. In the 4 months you've been involved with Zoya, how many times has she spent the night at your place?" "Well, that's complicated. She was living with you, so—" "How many times?" He thought about it. "Maybe 3 or 4 times? When you were out of town for work." "And how many times have you been to her parents' house, met her friends as her boyfriend instead of just a coworker?" We had to be discreet. "Derek." I leaned forward. "You weren't her boyfriend. You were her side piece." His face flushed red. "That's not true. She loves me. She was going to leave you after the wedding, start fresh with me." "After the wedding? Not before. She didn't want to hurt you. Or she didn't want to lose the financial security I provided while she figured out if you were a better option." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I could see the wheels turning in his head, processing information that didn't fit the narrative he'd been fed. "She told me you were abusive," he said weakly. "Did she show you bruises, police reports, hospital records?" "No, but did she ever ask you to help her leave, to provide a safe place for her to stay while she escaped this supposedly violent relationship?" "She said it was complicated. Derek, I work in construction. I've seen actual domestic violence situations, helped women get out of genuinely dangerous relationships. You know what they don't do? Plan elaborate weddings with their abusers while carrying on affairs with coworkers." The fight went out of him all at once, his shoulders sagging as the reality of the situation hit home. She played me. She played both of us. The difference is I found out before I married her. Derek stared into his beer for a long moment. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes. Hurt giving way to anger. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. "Nothing. I've already done everything I need to do. The video, the group chat, the cancellations, you've destroyed her. I documented her choices and let people draw their own conclusions. She's lost everything. Her family, her friends, her home. Actions have consequences, Derek. She made her choices knowing the risks." He finished his beer in one long gulp and stood up. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the wedding planning, didn't realize how deep she was in with you when we started up. But you knew she was engaged." "Yeah, I knew that." "Then you're not sorry about what you did. You're sorry you got caught." Derek left without another word, and I sat alone in the booth for a while, thinking about the layers of deception that had been peeled away. 4 months. Zoya had been carrying on with Derek for 4 months while planning our wedding, picking out flowers and tasting cakes and pretending to be excited about our future together. My phone buzzed with a new message. "Mike, can we please talk? I know you're angry, but there are things you need to understand." I was getting tired of people telling me there were things I didn't understand. The situation seemed pretty clear from where I sat, but curiosity got the better of me. I texted back, "Same place Derek and I just finished talking. You've got 10 minutes. Mike showed up in 8, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His usual goofy grin was nowhere to be found. replaced by the haggard expression of someone whose world had just collapsed. "You talked to Derek?" he said, sliding into the booth. "Enlightening conversation. He's been sleeping with my fiancée for 4 months." Mike winced. "Trent, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'm starting to think there's a lot more to this story than I originally thought. Zoya and we have history, before you two got together." "What kind of history?" "We dated in college. It was serious. At least I thought it was serious. She broke up with me right before graduation, said she wanted to focus on her career." I remembered now. Mike had mentioned a college girlfriend once or twice, but never by name. I'd assumed it was some random girl who didn't matter anymore. "When you started dating her, I thought it was just coincidence," Mike continued. "You met her at that barbecue, and I figured she didn't even remember me, but then she called me." "When?" "About 6 months after you two got serious. She said she'd made a mistake, that she realized she still had feelings for me." The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture that was even uglier than I'd imagined. "How long has this been going on, Mike?" "On and off for 2 years. She'd break it off whenever things got serious with you, then reach out again when she was bored or stressed or fighting with you. And you went along with it." "I loved her, man. I've been in love with her since college. When she said she was confused, that she didn't know how to choose between us, I thought maybe I had a chance." "So you decided to help her cheat on me?" "It wasn't like that." "What was it like, Mike?" He ran his hands through his hair, looking miserable. "She said she was going to break up with you after the wedding, that she just needed to get through the family obligations and the deposits and all that, and then she'd be free to be with me." "The same story she told Derek." Mike's head snapped up. "Derek? Your girlfriend has been running the same con on multiple guys, Mike. You weren't special. You were just another option she was keeping in reserve." The color drained from his face. "That's not... She wouldn't... 4 months, Mike. She's been sleeping with Derek for 4 months while telling you she was going to choose you after the wedding." "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and showed him the text thread with Derek, the messages where he'd confessed to their affair. Mike read them twice, his expression growing darker with each word. "She told me Derek was just a friend," he said quietly. "Said he was gay and I didn't have anything to worry about. Apparently Derek got the same story about you being just a friend who was confused about his feelings." Mike put his head in his hands. "God, I'm such an idiot." "Yeah, you are, but that doesn't excuse what you did." I know, and I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "When were you planning to tell me? Before the wedding? After? Or were you just going to let me marry her and keep sneaking around behind my back?" "She said she was going to handle it." "She said a lot of things, Mike. Most of them were lies." We sat in silence for a while, two guys who'd been played by the same woman in different ways. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost, but not quite. Whatever lies Zoya had told him, he'd known she was engaged to his best friend when he decided to pursue her. "What happens now?" Mike asked finally. "Now you live with the consequences of your choices, just like she does." "The whole town knows, Trent. Everyone we went to high school with, everyone from work. They've all seen the video." "Good. She's destroyed. Her family won't talk to her. Her friends have turned on her. She lost her job." "She lost her job?" "This morning. Derek's wife found out about the affair and called their HR department. Apparently workplace relationships violate company policy." I absorbed this information with grim satisfaction. I hadn't even known Derek was married, but it made sense. Zoya had a type. Unavailable men who represented some kind of challenge or forbidden fruit. "She's staying at a motel on Route 9. Mike continued. "The cheap one by the truck stop. She asked me to give her money for a better place, but I told her I was done." "Smart choice." "Is there any chance... could you maybe post something asking people to stop sharing the video? It's getting out of hand." I looked at my oldest friend, the guy who'd been best man at my almost wedding, who'd helped me move into my house, who'd been planning to betray me at the altar, and felt nothing but contempt. "No, Mike. I don't think I'll be doing that." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. "I guess I deserve that." "You deserve a lot worse than that." Mike left, and I sat alone in the bar for another hour, processing everything I'd learned. The scope of Zoya's deception was breathtaking, not just the affairs, but the elaborate web of lies she'd spun to keep all her options open. She'd been playing a long game, keeping multiple men on the hook while she decided which one offered the best future. The irony was that her indecision had cost her everything. If she'd just picked one of us and committed to it, she might have gotten away with it. Instead, her greed for attention and validation had brought her whole house of cards crashing down. My phone buzzed with a notification from the wedding group chat. Someone had posted a screenshot of a Facebook post from Derek's wife, a long, angry rant about home-wrecking office workers and cheating husbands. Apparently, Derek's marriage was another casualty of Zoya's games. The comments on the post were savage. People love a good cheating scandal, but they especially love it when the cheater gets their comeuppance. Zoya's name was being dragged through the mud by people who'd never even met her, her reputation destroyed by the viral nature of modern shame. Part of me felt like I should feel guilty about that, but mostly I just felt tired. I finished my beer and headed home, ready to start the next phase of my life. The phase where I didn't have to wonder if my partner was lying to me, didn't have to second-guess every interaction or worry about being made a fool of. It was going to be a good phase. 3 days later, I was back at the construction site, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of work. There's something therapeutic about physical labor when your personal life has exploded, the simple satisfaction of building something solid and real, something that won't lie to you or betray your trust. My crew had heard about the wedding cancellation, of course. In a town this size, gossip travels faster than bad weather, but they were good guys who understood that sometimes the less said, the better. They offered their support in the way that working men do, with nods and shoulder claps and an extra beer in the cooler with my name on it. "Heard you dodged a bullet there, boss," said Tommy, my lead electrician, as we reviewed the wiring plans for the new office building we were putting up. "Something like that?" "My ex-wife tried to clean me out in the divorce," he continued. "At least you found out before she could get her hooks into your assets." It was a practical way of looking at it, and probably the healthiest. I'd lost some money on deposits and cancellation fees, but I'd kept my house, my savings, and my sanity. In the grand scheme of things, I'd come out ahead. My phone rang around lunchtime. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Is this Trent Ardell?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. "This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. I'm calling about the viral video involving your former fiancé. Would you be interested in doing an interview about your experience?" I almost laughed. "No, thank you." "We could offer compensation for your time, and it would be a chance to tell your side of the story. My side of the story is already out there. Thanks for calling." I hung up and immediately blocked the number. The last thing I needed was to become part of the media circus that was forming around this situation. Let Zoya deal with the reporters and the social media vultures. I had a building to construct, but the calls kept coming. Local news, internet bloggers, even a producer from some daytime talk show who wanted to fly me out to New York for a segment about wedding day betrayals. I turned them all down and eventually just stopped answering numbers I didn't recognize. The real entertainment came from monitoring the group chat and social media. The story had taken on a life of its own, spawning memes and reaction videos and amateur detective work from people who'd never met any of us, but felt qualified to analyze our relationship dynamics. Someone had tracked down Zoya's social media accounts and was posting screenshots of old photos. Pictures of her with Derek at company parties, cozy shots with Mike from what looked like romantic dinners, even some images from college that showed her with other guys while she was supposedly dating Mike exclusively. "This girl has been running the same playbook for years," one commenter observed. "How did nobody see this pattern before?" asked another. "Men see what they want to see," replied a third, which stung because it was probably true. The most damaging post came from one of Derek's coworkers, who revealed that Zoya had been bragging about managing multiple relationships and keeping her options open during office happy hours. According to the post, she'd been treating the whole situation like a game, betting with friends about which guy she'd ultimately choose. She called it diversifying her portfolio, the coworker wrote. Said she learned in business school that you never put all your eggs in one basket. That post got shared thousands of times, cementing Zoya's reputation as a calculating manipulator rather than just someone who'd made a mistake. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and it wasn't favorable. I was reviewing supply invoices in my trailer when Mike showed up at the construction site. I saw him through the window, standing by the gate and looking uncertain. He was wearing a suit, probably came straight from his job at the insurance agency, and looked wildly out of place among the hard hats and work boots. I considered ignoring him, but curiosity got the better of me. I walked over to the gate and waited for him to speak. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he started. "You're right. I just wanted you to know that I told everyone the truth about the history with Zoya, about how long it's been going on. I posted it in the group chat. I pulled out my phone and checked. Sure enough, there was a long message from Mike detailing his college relationship with Zoya and the on and off affair that had been happening for 2 years. It was surprisingly honest, admitting his own role in the deception and apologizing not just to me, but to everyone who'd been caught up in the drama. "Why?" I asked. "Because people deserve to know the whole truth," and because I'm tired of carrying around the guilt. It was a decent gesture, probably too little too late, but decent nonetheless. The message had already generated dozens of responses, most of them negative toward Mike, but acknowledging his honesty in coming forward. Zoya's been trying to reach me, Mike continued. Wants me to coordinate some kind of joint statement saying we were all drunk and the video was misinterpreted. And? I told her to go to hell. I nodded. Good choice. She's really struggling, Trent. I know you don't care and I don't blame you, but she's in a bad place. She made her bed. I know. I just thought you should know that Derek cut her off too. His wife threatened to take the kids and half his assets if he had any more contact with her, so she's really alone now? Huh? I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. Zoya was an adult who'd made calculated choices. The fact that those choices had consequences wasn't my responsibility. Is there anything else? I asked. I'm sorry, man, for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. Okay. Mike nodded and walked back to his car, leaving me standing by the gate. I watched him drive away and realized I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no desire for reconciliation. He'd been my best friend for 15 years, and now he was just someone I used to know. That evening, I was having dinner at the diner downtown when I spotted a familiar figure in the corner booth. Zoya sat alone, picking at a plate of fries and scrolling through her phone. She looked different, thinner, paler, wearing clothes that looked like she'd slept in them. She glanced up as I passed her table, and our eyes met for the first time since the venue walkthrough. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she looked away, her shoulders hunching like she was trying to disappear. I could have kept walking, should have kept walking, but something made me stop. Zoya. She looked up again, hope flickering in her eyes. Trent, hi. How are you doing? It was a stupid question. She looked terrible, and we both knew it. I've been better, she said with a weak smile. I saw the news trucks at my parents' house yesterday. Apparently this is big enough to warrant actual journalism now. You could make it stop. How? Tell the truth, all of it. Stop trying to spin the story and just admit what you did. She laughed bitterly. You think the truth will make people forgive me? I think the truth might let you move forward instead of being stuck in this lie forever. The truth is that I screwed up everything good in my life because I was scared of commitment and addicted to attention. The truth is that I hurt the only man who ever really loved me because I was too selfish to appreciate what I had. It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard her say. So say that, I told her, publicly. Own your mistakes and start over somewhere else. Would you forgive me if I did that? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the confident, manipulative woman who'd been playing games with multiple men, but a broken person who'd finally run out of moves. No, I said, but you might forgive yourself. I left her sitting there and walked home through the quiet streets of our small town, thinking about forgiveness and consequences and the difference between justice and revenge. I'd gotten my justice. The truth was out, the wedding was canceled, and I was free to build a life with someone who actually wanted to be in it. The revenge had been provided by the internet, by viral videos and public shaming and the relentless machinery of social media outrage. I hadn't needed to destroy Zoya's life. She'd done that herself, and the world had simply watched it happen. My phone buzzed with one final message as I reached my front door. It was from Zoya. Thank you for talking to me tonight. You're a better person than I deserved. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations don't need replies. Tomorrow I'd go back to work. I'd build something solid and real, something that wouldn't betray my trust or lie about its intentions. And slowly, day by day, I'd build a new life to go along with it. It was going to be a good life.